Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruben Flores Saib, and I'm an Associate Director of Licensing at the USC Stevens Center for Innovation. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this installment in our webinar series titled From Discovery to Commercialization, Valuable Guidance to Enhance the Success of Your Startup. The Stevens Center is co-sponsoring this webinar series with the USC chapter of the National Academy of Inventors. Please visit the Stevens Center website events page at stevens.usc.edu/events to see our lineup of topics and speakers. The topic of today's webinar is Meet the Investors, Anzu Partners. The presenter for today's webinar is Jimmy Kan, PhD, who is a principal at Anzu Partners. I will ask Jimmy to say a bit more about his background, but briefly, he joined Anzu Partners in 2017 after spending 4 years at Qualcomm. Jimmy earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in material physics from UC San Diego, as well as a PhD in material science and engineering. He is also an inventor with over 20 granted US patents. We're thrilled to have him join us today. One housekeeping note before we begin. Attendees can submit questions in the Zoom Q&A feature during the webinar. I will monitor the questions during the webinar, and we will address as many of them as time allows at the end. We are recording the presentation, and we'll let you know when it's posted on YouTube. Let's get started. Well, welcome, Jimmy. It's really an honor and a pleasure to have you join us for this series. I'm super excited to hear about your background, how you ended up doing what you're doing, and learning about Anzu Partners. So we have asked Jimmy to give a little presentation about himself and a presentation on Anzu Partners. We will do a brief discussion after that, and then we'll try to answer as many questions as possible from the audience. Welcome again, and Jimmy, it's your webinar now.
Great. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet you all. And thank you, Ruben, and the organizers at USC for this invitation to participate. And I really appreciate the kind introduction as well. I hope everybody finds this presentation useful, and then we can have some robust Q&A after the presentation as well. To provide a little bit more color on my own background, as Ruben mentioned, I'm currently a principal on the investment team at Anzu Partners based out of our San Diego office. And here I'm primarily focused on working with startups to take hardware and next generation material technologies to market. And before joining Anzu a bit over 4 years ago, I was primarily a technical person and have a background in materials physics. I spent several years at Qualcomm as a hardware engineer and then as a researcher. And this was primarily working on non-volatile memory technology for energy efficient computation. And then also spent some time there looking at a variety of different sensor and IoT technologies. Before Qualcomm, my PhD from UCSD was focused on essentially exploiting the various quirky and unique properties of nanomaterials for a variety of different magnetic, optical, and electronic properties. And then somewhere in there, see here, there we go. Somewhere in there as a hobby that's probably taken a bit too far. I also spent some time consulting coffee shops on the science and process engineering of coffee roasting. So you wouldn't actually believe how many similarities there are between semiconductor fabrication and industrial scale coffee roasting. All of the factors that you care about when doing chemical vapor deposition actually translate really well when trying to make sure that you get a great cup of coffee out at the end of the day. So let me give you an overview of what we're doing at Anzu Partners. And I also wanted to spend some time today going through a framework that we try to keep in mind while evaluating potential investments so that you as a university entrepreneur or somebody in the ecosystem can try to get as prepared as possible. And as Ruben mentioned, please don't hesitate to raise any questions, and we can definitely answer them after the presentation is over. Great. So a little bit of background on Anzu. Anzu is an early stage venture capital firm. We're primarily focused on investing in teams that have developed breakthrough industrial and life science technologies. So we're providing investment in the form of capital in Series C to Series B investment rounds. But we're also working very closely with our entrepreneurs to try to commercialize their innovations by providing some expertise on business development, market and product development, and in operations, in addition to providing our firm's global connectivity. We were founded in 2014, and since then we've grown from a small, scrappy team of 3 people to now more than 45 full-time employees based in San Diego, Washington, D.C., and Boston. And we also have some presence in San Francisco, Atlanta, and Tampa. Across the 2 different investment funds, we're currently managing about $400 million, and there are currently 25 companies in our venture portfolio. Our investment team also has a very deep technical bench, and most actually have PhDs in electrical engineering, physics, bioengineering, and chemistry. And this was intended actually to help us understand deeply the technologies that we're evaluating and investing in, and to be able to communicate with these technical entrepreneurs. So at the founding of the firm, we noticed that there was an almost endemic problem in the venture investing community. There was this huge concentration of private venture investment into companies that roughly have, this very generic profile, which is they're based in Palo Alto, they're founded by a few Stanford computer science grads, and then they're either disrupting the rideshare, social media, scooter transportation, or different burger delivery industries. In fact, I pulled a company description from this list, and so I'll read this to you verbatim. The company is based in San Mateo, California, and provides cloud-based software as a service, customer experience management, and enterprise feedback management software, as well as services. So unfortunately, the breakthrough technology startups that are in energy, industrial automation, manufacturing, and hardware were really getting lost in the sea of marketplace, app, and consumer tech companies. And I have this statistic here, and it's amazing. Less than 7% of all capital has gone into these industrial innovation and hard technologies in the past 2 decades. And here I mean things like hardware, energy storage materials, semiconductors, structural materials, and things like chemical and biological synthesis approaches. So at that point, we set off to make investments into these traditionally underfunded technology companies. And they really do have the opportunity to actually change the world, deliver great value to the industry, and then also deliver great returns to the investors. And we're roughly targeting these technologies and companies that have innovations in what we call the 5 M's. So that's materials, and this includes innovations in nanomaterials, composites, energy storage, and then alternatives to critical metals and minerals. We're looking at manufacturing, which includes things like additive manufacturing and 3D printing, new ways to make biologic drugs, and then robotic automation in factories. The next one here, monitoring and measurement. We're looking at new sensor modalities, new ways to tighten manufacturing and measurement process controls, but also looking at new types of disease diagnostics, as well as bringing more analytical rigor into biomanufacturing. And then finally here we have modeling, and this includes things like advanced simulation, electronic design automation tools, quantum computing, and then in some aspects, computational materials discovery. And then we're specifically looking for technologies that help to fuel and accelerate a bunch of different kinds of mega trends in the industry that can lead to huge world-changing applications and rewards, such as shown here, the transition from fossil fuels in transportation and as a power source to renewables, and then the electrification of automobiles. We're looking at the transformation from manual inspection and measurement in manufacturing and product development processes to AI-enabled sensors and IoT that provides much deeper insights. And then we're also looking at things like the evolution from small molecule, traditional chemical drug manufacturing, so you can think about aspirin, to ways to make biologic drugs like monoclonal antibodies and cell and gene therapies more effective and manufacturable. And amongst these, there's also several others. And to that end, we've invested in over 25 companies with these kinds of technologies and founders. And the companies are almost always founded by scientists and by engineers and are diverse in background as well as in geography across the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia. So I apologize for the very heavy amount of text on this page, but in the world of startups, software and data analytics companies actually have a really unique advantage. They can be very lightweight and agile. They can quickly build products and release these builds in an iterative fashion with minimal hard costs associated with each improvement. And then ultimately, they're also unlikely to fail due to the technology not working as long as the engineers are properly executing. On the other side, industrial tech startups have challenges in all of these areas. The technology and companies then actually require an ecosystem of support as you advance from the early technology readiness levels to the later technology readiness levels through the R&D stages. And what I'd like to point out here is venture capital and private equity is only part of the story once these companies get through the heavy R&D. And that means developing and investing in these kinds of companies is harder. But if the technology and market ends up being winners, there's huge upside available and the ability to create many of these kinds of world-changing applications. So the other kinds of ecosystems of support that you think about when a company might be at TRL 1 to 3, example funders might be somebody like DARPA, NSF, ARPA-E, or some of these other grant agencies. And then as the science becomes proven out and there's more robust development happening, people like angel investors, business incubators, SBIRs, and friends and family can begin to get involved. And then once there's demonstration of this ability to scale up the discovery and some evidence of the business impact, that's where the early stage venture capital firms like us can start getting involved. And at Anzu, we're really not out there to take science risk. And so that means there can't be any doubt in our minds that any laws of physics or mathematics are being broken by the innovation. And typically this means that you have some sort of minimum viable product or a prototype and something that's been validated by a third party. We're very, yep, Ruben.
So Jimmy, just to understand that fully, the TRL level of investment for Anzu is a 6 or 7?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
9 would also be fine, but Great. But that being said, we're pretty glad to get involved with companies while they're in product development and in engineering stages. And we're very okay with pre-revenue companies. And I think it's actually in this stage that we bring the most value from our team and then from our network, which I'll discuss in the upcoming slides. The companies that we're usually invested in are spun out of universities that have incubated the technology. And this is where graduate students, postdocs, and professors have worked together to publish the science and really validate that the fundamental breakthrough is working. Then that work is often funded by government grants from the various agencies that I mentioned earlier. And then we're also working closely with the tech transfer offices at these kinds of universities to spin out the companies, develop fair licensing terms, and then further organize support to the company from the universities or from these kinds of agencies down the line. Usually, we are the largest investor in the early stage rounds at the companies, but as I talk about the ecosystem, we're always looking for ways to encourage the participation of other financial and strategic co-investors. Because it really takes a village, we have to have people from industry, we have to have people from financial, and people from government working together. And with investment from industrial partners in these kind of relevant fields, the companies actually have a much faster pathway to market. So for example, in materials, we've invested alongside BASF. That was an investment in materials and coatings. In an edge AI semiconductor chip company, we've invested alongside the Amazon Alexa Fund and West Virginia University. And then in life sciences, we're co-invested with Illumina Ventures in a cell sorting tool company that's based out of San Diego. And then we've even invested alongside In-Q-Tel, the venture capital arm of the CIA, sometimes in technologies that had dual use applications. As I mentioned, our organization is built around a few different levels of support to our portfolio companies. The investment team is actively involved with all of our portfolio companies, but we also have this large business services team, a group of really well-networked advisors with deep industry experience on call. And then our own investors in our fund are also current or former business executives from companies all around the world that can help our startups get to CTO's offices, get to high-level executive offices all around the world. Okay, just to describe our business services team a bit more in depth, because I view that as quite differentiated from what other startup VC firms are doing. Oftentimes you are a researcher or a university professor spinning out a company, and the last thing that you want to spend your time doing is finding out how to survive a financial audit or deal with things like setting up payroll or benefits. So we've created this team of people with titles like Director of Intellectual Property, VP of Manufacturing, and even interim CFO to help our founders really focus on the product development, focus on our customers, and on partnerships creation instead. And the success has been quite phenomenal. Our recruiting team has helped hire hundreds of engineers, salespeople, and executives for our companies. Our in-house IP counsel has helped really greatly improve the efficiency and efficacy of filing and acquiring IP. And then we're also providing capabilities like PR, product management, and sometimes even grant reporting and finance management, because we all know how big of a burden that can be to report to DARPA and NSF sometimes. So ultimately, we're trying to create value not just through the investment of the capital or the participation on the board of directors and governance, or even just making a few opportune introductions here and there, but we built a team that really helps our startup companies punch above their weight class. So I hope this helps provide some introduction to Anzu, the types of companies that we're investing in and looking for, and how we're hoping to get involved with entrepreneurs. So Ruben, I'm not sure where we are on time, but I do have a second half of this presentation too, which I do want to spend some time describing a bit of how we think about evaluating companies, if that's helpful.
That is very important for us. How about if I ask you just one or two questions about this part of the presentation, then we move on to the other one? Would that work out, or do you want to just keep going? What do you prefer?
Oh, we can take a break real quick.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. And I'm fascinated by the fact that coffee roasting shares so many similarities with industrial processes. I've never heard that before. I'm really excited to look into that as well. You mentioned that Anzu has $400 million under management with 25 companies that have been invested on. How many new investments is Anzu looking to do over the next 1 to 3 to 5 years?
That's a good question. I mean, we're typically making somewhere between 6 to 10 investments a year. Okay. We're currently on our second fund, and we're actively deploying out of that at the moment, typically investing somewhere between $4 to $8 million at a time for a first check.
And you mentioned some characteristics about Anzu that are quite differentiated, as you mentioned, the hiring of highly specific technical and service support, members to provide growth support to the investments that you make. Is that part of your investment strategy? When you look at companies, do you kind of decide how to invest not only on the technology and the transformational technology and impact, but in the fact that those companies could benefit from your expert services providers, or that's just an add-on benefit?
I think that this is an add-on benefit. We're obviously not hoping to make investments where we have to deploy all of our forces to commercialize that entity. But sometimes there's some small gaps or some holes in companies that you need somebody qualified to immediately fill until you can bring somebody on full time, or it's the right time to bring somebody on full time. So that's the place where we can really get involved with the highly motivated and qualified staff that we have.
Yeah. Let's move on. We want to give plenty of time for Q&A from the audience. So you want to go ahead for another 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. So if we go on here, because I'm imagining that the group that's attending here is here because there's the desire to commercialize a technology via a company, one thing that I always advise people to think about is, does your funding source match your technology or business model? And that's to say, VC is not always the right choice of funding for commercializing certain technologies. In fact, there's a pretty strict set of return expectations that VCs have that make it so that we can actually only invest in hyper growth, massive market potential kinds of opportunities. Actually, if anybody's interested in doing a bunch of math with me later on to dissect that statement, feel free to reach out afterwards. But suffice it to say, it's totally reasonable to want to create a lifestyle business that will generate income for you and your employees. It's also great to want to start a hyper growth company that can IPO in 7 to 12 years, targeting massive global changes, or something in between. But you have to be deliberate about considering the potential of the technology and what kind of life you want to have for yourself. Otherwise, things can get pretty confusing with misalignment between you and your investors. So I would roughly bucket companies into these 3 different types of categories. One is the hyper growth that I'm talking about, where you should go after VC and grow as fast as possible. The other is you may have a highly useful but niche technology and product that solves certain problems for specific customers. A way to fund that is via SBIR or via JDA with a customer, or even through just early acquisition. And then you have this bucket of, sometimes tech will evolve into a want to have versus a need to have kind of product. It might still have broad consumer appeal, but the real place where you should sell that is via e-commerce, Kickstarter. The really ridiculous version is things like Shark Tank. Okay. So let's just assume that you've decided that you're a VC business and you put together a pitch deck and now you're standing in front of a venture capital investor seeking capital. What's going on in my head? Here's a very casual framework focused around 6 questions, which I'll dig into a bit and try to provide an example. And if your company can provide a clear affirmative answer to roughly these 6 questions, your chances of funding, further capital raises, and then commercial success also goes way up in my mind. And a single point of failure in one of these aspects, it doesn't kill the business, but it also makes it pretty unattractive sometimes for a traditional venture investor to get involved. So first, let me ask this question of why now, right? In 2021, there's essentially no new ideas anymore. Every new technology is essentially a rehash of some old concept. What is the compelling story behind why you are projecting an explosion in the business now? Is there some sort of new scientific breakthrough that solved a previous limitation? Is there some sort of new enabling technology in another industry that now makes you and your business model possible? Is there now some sort of customer segment that now needs this product offering and then the demand is poised to explode? I mean, one example there is it would have been pretty bad to be a mobile phone app development business in 2006 before the iPhone was released in 2007. But just a few years later, that story is totally different, right? Because now you have a customer segment and you have a technology that's propelling you forward. The other two here, for example, are there more investors in this ecosystem now, and is the merger and acquirer ecosystem more aggressive? And then finally, is there some previous market or innovative force that's run out of steam? And I'll give you a couple of examples for some of these. In this example, this is a made-up company, but hopefully it illustrates the point. This is a chart. Actually, let me see if I can get a laser pointer. This is a chart that shows the increase in the bit density of magnetic and flash-based digital storage between 1990 and 2020. And just one amazing thing to note for the sake of just trivia is in just these 30 years, the amount of information that you can store on the same size device has gone up by about 50,000 times. It's quite a technological feat. So keep in mind that the y-axis here is logarithmic. Anyways, so this company, Acme, they show up in 2000 and say they have a great new material and a process technology to increase storage density from 10 to 15 gigabits per square inch. This sounds pretty good. 50% increase, will save a lot of costs for customers. Unfortunately, this isn't investable because this is an example of where the previous market and innovative forces haven't run out of steam yet. By the time Acme can get this technology out of the lab into a product and manufacturable in 5 years, the incumbents will have completely left them in the dust. So what actually happened was that in those 5 years, the industry went from 10 to not 15, but 100 gigabits per square inch. And that's something that you have to recognize. Another example on this one where it actually is a good story for why now. This company, Invitae, this is a real company, and they have a series of genetic tests that's targeted towards family planning. Their business model was to make these tests like carrier screening and non-invasive prenatal testing much more affordable and accessible. And previously, these kinds of tests were pretty expensive and hard for most people to afford. In this situation, there was an enabling technology in next generation sequencing that had seen massive cost reductions with technology development by Illumina, PacBio, and others. And then on the backs of this enabling technology in another industry, the business model for Invitae actually makes sense, and they're able to deliver these tests at a very reasonable and rapidly decreasing cost. This company was founded in 2010, and today it's pretty successful. It's got an $8 billion market cap. The second question is, do we love this team? It's hard enough to develop products due to technology challenges, but you really don't want to compound that with a team that can't deliver on product development or commercial aspects, or are just bad at relationships. And there's a lot of aspects here to dissect that make us really attracted to certain founding teams. But let me just go through a few of them. The first one is absolutely essential: no jerks. And what I mean by this is a typical VC to founder relationship is going to be 5 to 7 years or longer. And in that amount of time, I'm going to spend probably as much time with you as I spend with my spouse. So I must really want to work with you every day going forward for a long time. Some of these other ones, it's been proven over and over again that diverse founding teams are more effective. You have to have a CEO with a strong and clear and big vision for the company, and this courage to really push forward. And then you also want your management team members' skill sets to complement each other. And an example of that is in this Anzu portfolio company that demonstrates a lot of these attributes. NanoSelect is a microfluidic cell sorter company that's a spin out from UCSD. We have a great combination of a visionary leader here in Chris Neary, with a lot of industry experience. We have technical excellence with 3 PhDs that are leading voices in the field. And then we have a mix of finance and commercial experience to really get the product out to market reliably.
Jimmy,
yep.
Could you go back one slide? I have a question regarding the prior slide, which may be important for the audience that we're talking to here.
Sure.
You actually specifically mentioned a full-time business leader with industry experience. Are you, to help others think about it, is that different from the CEO? Is it okay to have a partial time CEO, but you need a full-time chief business officer or other? that is managing the business affairs, or do they mix? How do you think about this? And again, to tell the people who are attending the webinar.
Right. I mean, the way that we sort of think about this is part-time CEOs are sometimes okay, but
sometimes okay.
They have to really be able to flip that switch and become full-time the moment it's the right time for this company to scale and deserves the full attention. You can have a full-time business leader, like a CBO, chief commercial officer, that is okay to be present in the business in the early founding stages. But the idea here is a founding team of 4 technical PhDs with no industry experience or understanding of the customer, and then how to get this product or service into the value chain and to the customer is a bit of a red flag for us.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, then moving on a little bit. The third question is, I mean, it may be a little bit snarky, but we ask ourselves sometimes, could we just build this ourselves in a weekend? And what I mean is, we got a highly technical investment team with a bunch of PhDs in electrical engineering, chemical engineering, physics. So we have to evaluate the potential for competitors to easily replicate or devise alternative solutions. And a good investment candidate should have a bunch of different moats against these kind of competitors. One is you need to have a sufficiently differentiated or unique technology that provides a several-year head start against new entrants. So somebody can't just decide tomorrow, I want to start this company and then be able to build your product. Another aspect here is things like strong intellectual property protection, patents, trademarks. And then, of course, years of experience that accumulates into trade secrets that can be brought into the company. I won't talk too much about these other ones, but an example here would be a company that we screened several years ago called FLI Charge. This is a perfectly serviceable company. It has a great product. It's seeing good adoption in the market. They are an inventor of a power delivery mat that can charge a variety of devices. You can see why there would be consumer adoption of this. However, from an IP competitive advantage and technical differentiation aspect, it wasn't high enough, because we really had the mentality of, well, we can bring together a team of electrical engineers and reproduce this solution in relatively short order or find alternatives. The next one here is, does the company have a quantifiable and obvious value proposition? And the thing to remember here is, it's almost never the lack of technology development that causes a business to fail. More startups fail due to lack of customers, either because of no market need or because of slow uptake, than because they weren't able to develop the product fast enough. So you need to have a clear value proposition, which is, how does the customer benefit that can be concretely quantifiable? So how much dollar or time savings are you providing to the customer compared to their existing solution or an alternative solution? And this can also manifest in things like, what % risk mitigation are you providing them? What % yield enhancement you're giving them? And then a third type of value proposition is, are you enabling some sort of new functionality or new improvement, allowing them to see or do something that they were never able to do before? One example that I think is a clear, quantifiable value proposition within our portfolio is from a company called Aspinity. This is a hardware edge AI chip company that is dramatically improving power efficiency of edge AI devices with analog machine learning. And what they're able to demonstrate here is a very clear 5 to 50x improvement in power and bandwidth efficiency, enabling a lot of battery powered devices to save tons of power, or enabling a new functionality in moving previously plugged in devices now to battery.
Wow.
The next one here, question number 5. What's going on in my mind as I hear the pitch sometimes is, can these guys even make the thing that they're talking about? Is it real? They have to prove that they're truly beyond the science plateau, and the capital needs to be deployed for product development, for commercialization, and then not for basic research. And the way that you typically do that is, you're able to provide a live demonstration of the technology or product in action, you can show an ability to manufacture or pilot this at proof of concept levels. And then one that's very important always is getting third-party validation from customers, labs, partners, or especially industry experts. One example here is, I think that this is enough said for anybody that has heard anything about startups for the past 10 years. Great market, visionary founder, amazing technology. We can't make it. So I think this is the last one. Is the serviceable, obtainable market attractive enough? And so you can have an extremely compelling product that serves a lot of customer needs, but fail to raise venture financing because of VC return requirements. These kinds of products that serve small markets are typically unable to support venture returns that need to be 8 to 10x on their capital. So the obtainable market and then the total addressable market need to be really large and growing for companies with new technologies to be able to scale rapidly. So typically this means you need billion-dollar markets that are experiencing double-digit growth. The markets you have to well understand and understand where your technology and product fits within that ecosystem. So, for the electric vehicle market, your TAM is typically not anything that's associated with electric vehicles, but what technology and how many sales can you actually get into that industry? And then the third one here that I think that some people miss is you need to have a credible story about how your company is going to quickly ramp to hundreds of millions of dollars potentially of revenue within the lifetime of an investment, which might be 5 to 10 years. One example here that's well illustrated by a company called Quantum State, which is developing solid state batteries, is the massive untapped battery market for electric vehicles. Now, there's debate around whether this is a manufacturable technology, whether this is really science plateau ready, but they do a good job of elucidating why they are a great venture investment in terms of total addressable market. There's $400 billion, $50 billion of potential battery sales. Only 2% of vehicles today are hybrid or battery electric vehicles. So a huge amount of potential growth in this industry. Great. So we've gone through the 6 different questions. Finally, I just want to leave you with some advice that's actionable in the near future. Here are some examples to pursue while you're currently in an ideation state or during your grant funding or SBIR funding period. Given that all of these are things that you might, a VC might want to see, you should start them well in advance and typically way earlier than you think you might need to. And so that includes things like devising a compelling story about why your technology solves a large and crucial problem today, recruiting or becoming a full-time executive who really believes in the vision, file patents or trademarks, work with your university technology transfer office, participate in NSF Corp. This is a program that helps technical entrepreneurs really understand customer and product fit. Having been a mentor for this program in the past, I can say it will save you a lot of headache and time down the line when 3 or 5 years later, you realize you have to change your business completely. For some industries, publish impactful and peer-reviewed articles about your technology as a point of validation. And then for all companies, sample the technology and co-develop with potential partners way earlier than you think. They will tell you how in demand the solution is and will be glad to support you if they see the potential and the capabilities of the technology going forward. Ruben, so that is all I had for today, and glad to open it up for questions afterwards now.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. You have provided an invaluable, roadmap and set of, thinking considerations for any academic entrepreneur, anybody who's starting a new venture based on a highly technical new product or service. So thank you very much for that. This was actually highly valuable. We do have one question in the Q&A, And I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I'll ask it, but the question is from Michael Wedgie. And the question is, how do you qualify and or evaluate investors? What amounts are you looking to invest in your fund? So I'm not sure if he's talking about, how you raise funds or other co-investors, but let's talk about those partners that,
Sure. I mean, I think that, if the question is about limited partners or potential investors in Anzu as a fund,
right.
the way that we qualify them is, are they helpful and are they strategic to the types of companies that we're devising? So we are not randomly accepting capital from just high net worth individuals. We want to make sure that our LPs really understand the mission, are involved and engaged somehow in industrial technology development, or are actually able to help our portfolio companies down the line too if needed.
Yeah, so there was a clarification. Yeah, it's about the LPs that are, providing the capital to run your investment fund. So thank you very much for that. I do have a number of questions, and do you have, within these 25 companies that you've invested, do you have a success exit at this point that you can share with us, or growth or market penetration that comes to mind that you can share?
Yeah, I can share a couple of examples of good successes. So on the hardware side, we have a company that's called Axon. This is a company that is making spectrometers and was serving the optical coherence tomography market. This company exited several years ago for quite a healthy return to a strategic player in the industry called Excelitas. Another company here in the hardware space, Pivotal Systems, is a creator of the world's most precise and fast on-off gas flow controllers for the semiconductor industry. And this was a technology that was devised over several years to serve deposition, etching, things like atomic layer deposition for memory and logic fabrication. This company actually went public and listed a couple of years ago as well.
Thank you.
One other, actually, I'll just give one more example here in NanoSelect. We made an investment in this company several years ago when they were, I would say, early commercial, beginning to sell to the industry, getting feedback from academic and research users. Since then, the company has really gotten a lot of feedback from the industry, iterated on their product, devised a commercial and sales team and strategy, and has grown revenue about 40% year over year since the investment. And now hundreds of labs out there in the ecosystem are users of NanoSelect's Wolf compact flow cytometers.
Thank you. That's super exciting. Thank you for those specifics. I know Banyan biomarkers. I know some of the people who were involved in the development of the tests in R&D as well. You mentioned the company grew from 4 to 45 from 2014 to now, right? I mean, that's a really big growth. And I could enumerate or think about some of the success factors, but what do you attribute the successes or the success that Anzu has had in such a short time?
I think that the success is about the firm's companies or the portfolio companies really solving big world problems. I mean, I think it's somewhat hard for an LP or for the staff to get massively interested and invested in certain companies when all you're doing is making it a little bit easier for somebody to rent a scooter off the street. But it's a much different problem when you're enabling something like more precise cancer diagnostics. You're enabling massive power savings. You're enabling critical materials independence from other countries. So I think that these kinds of motivations are pervasive throughout the Anzu team, and as well as through our LPs and through our portfolio companies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You know, I do want to go back to something that you mentioned, that is to emphasize to those aspiring entrepreneurs that, you know, an acceptable risk return is 8 to 10x your total investment for a VC. So if Anzu invests, and by the way, I had a question for you. Anzu invests 2.5 to 5.7 millions over time on one of his portfolio companies. We'll do the math, right? And your entire company requires 30, 40, 45 million dollars to get to the point where, you know, you're actually selling a product, and you're not needing more capital to develop and operate your self-sustain. You need to start doing the math now and realizing what is the size of the total addressable market that you're trying to solve, to avoid, you know, starting conversations that are not going to be productive for anybody. We get this question all the time, and I actually meant to discuss it with you before, but how would you prefer to be contacted by folks at the university? And the answer varies from VC to VC. Some like to be contacted directly. Some of them like when we refer people to them to the tech transfer office. Do you want to share how would you like to be contacted? What's your preferred method?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are obviously free to reach out if you'd like to discuss and you'd like to, you know, run through venture math and things like that. But
Great.
You know, in the interest of building the ecosystem and making sure that we're, you know, working with all of the stakeholders and partners, it is also always very helpful for the university technology transfer offices to sort of collate and work with a group of entrepreneurs to bring a group of promising companies at once. And that really enables us to not have just this bilateral conversation between the investor and the company, but also, you know, how can the university help in, you know, facilitating that interaction?
I appreciate you saying that, Jimmy. And we try to be as much of a partner in the growth of those enterprises. You know, our former role ends at the execution of the license agreement, the management of the patents that are then handed over to the startup. But we can certainly provide, through our network of connections and experience, business experience, advice to those funders. So we'll be happy to, you know, pass along to you any inquiries that come through the office. And is your email listed on the Anzu Partners website, or?
Yeah, it is, or it should be. Otherwise, you can just contact me at jjk@anzupartners.com.
There you go. There you have it, you folks. Okay, I don't see more questions on the Q&A feature. So I just had a couple of things. How to get a hold of you, TRLs. Actually, believe it or not, for the first time ever, I'm running out of questions to ask you. Let's take it back to USC. So I didn't see in the list of universities USC yet. Did I miss that?
Yeah, we're not there yet. Not there yet, but, you know, hoping for USC to definitely join the ranks in the next couple of years.
So you say you're based in San Diego, but is your area of influence Southern California, or is there someone else looking at LA, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, the team members don't really have geographic areas of influence so much as topical areas of influence. You know, I mentioned the different you know, skill sets and backgrounds.
Right.
So, you know, although it does make it a little bit easier that I'm in the same time zone and can visit if needed.
Perfect. Okay, so if we have, and I know we have a number of attendees, if we have potential, you know, business ideas, enterprises that can be presented to you know, to Anzu Partner, they should definitely reach out to you and contact you. We're also happy to, you know, direct whoever wants to contact you in the future. Well, we don't have any more questions or comments at this point. Is there anything else that you want to share with the people who are joining us today regarding Anzu or your aspirations about working with USC?
No, I think it's been good today, and, you know, glad to be able to share some of this experience and share some of this advice, and, you know, feel free to reach out with any questions.
You actually made it very easy for us this time because your presentation was extremely well organized. It addressed all the points that we typically, you know, have to go back and forth with some of our VCs. And one question that we have is are you willing to share all or parts of your presentation?
I can probably hold the presentation a little bit and then share a set.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. A few highlights. Well, I encourage everybody to ask questions, going once, going twice. But if not, we're actually going to end up early for the first time ever, 10 minutes, 9 minutes early. And Jimmy, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time and expertise today. For the rest of the attendees, I want to invite you to join us on Wednesday, April 7 at 1 o'clock for our next webinar called Winning Business Strategies for Startups. Thank you again, Jimmy. Everybody enjoy the rest of your afternoon and be safe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.